The grand ballroom of the New York Charity Gala hummed with the weight of opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light across marble floors, their reflections dancing like liquid gold on the sequined gowns and polished cufflinks of the city's elite. The air smelled of jasmine and ambition, a heady mix of perfume and whispered alliances. At the center of it all stood Melania Trump, a vision in a gown the color of midnight, its fabric catching the light like a star-strewn sky. Her posture was regal, her smile serene, a study in composure amid the storm of cameras and curiosity. The event had been billed as an evening of philanthropy, a gathering to celebrate initiatives for children's education, but beneath the veneer of civility, currents of tension thrummed. Journalists lurked at the edges of the room, their recorders poised like weapons, their smiles sharp as blades. They were predators in silk ties and stilettos, waiting for a slip, a stumble, a moment of vulnerability. Melania's speech had been brief but potent, a call for unity, for compassion, her voice a soft melody threading through the room. She spoke of classrooms rebuilt, scholarships granted, futures unshackled. Her Slovenian accent lent her words an almost musical gravity, and for a moment the crowd seemed to forget the political poison that clung to her name. Applause rippled through the room as she concluded, polite but genuine, until a voice sliced through the warmth like a shard of ice. "Mrs. Trump," it rang out, acidic and deliberate. All heads turned toward David Calloway, a journalist whose reputation preceded him, a provocateur draped in the armor of hard-hitting journalism. He stood near the stage, microphone thrust into the space between them like a lance. "How does it feel," he asked, his tone slick with faux curiosity, "to champion children's futures while standing beside a man accused of destroying them?" The room froze. Glasses paused mid-sip, breaths hitched. Melania's expression didn't flicker, but her knuckles tightened imperceptibly on the podium. Calloway pressed on, emboldened by the silence. "Your husband's policies have torn families apart. His rhetoric fuels division. Yet here you are, playing the saint. Isn't that hypocrisy?" The words hung, venomous, in the air. A few guests exchanged glances, some uncomfortable, others hungry for the spectacle. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every micro-expression, every twitch. Melania opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a figure emerged from the shadows of the audience. Barron Trump moved with the quiet certainty of a storm rolling in. At 17, he was taller than most men in the room, his posture straight, his eyes sharp and unflinching. The crowd parted instinctively as he ascended the stage, his polished Oxfords clicking against the steps. He didn't look at his mother, didn't glance at the jeering journalist. His gaze was fixed on Calloway, steady as a sniper's. When he reached the podium, he placed a hand gently on Melania's shoulder. A silent, "I've got this," before turning to face the man who dared attack her. "Mr. Calloway," Barron began, his voice calm, almost conversational, "you've asked my mother a question, let me return it." The room leaned in, the silence so thick it could suffocate. "How does it feel to reduce a room full of philanthropists, educators, and survivors to a backdrop for your theatrics?" Calloway blinked, thrown by the directness. Barron didn't wait for an answer. "You didn't come here for answers. You came for a soundbite, for clicks, for the adrenaline rush of watching a woman you've never met defend her life to a stranger who's already made up his mind." A murmur rose, low, approving. Barron stepped forward, his voice softening, as if explaining arithmetic to a child. "My mother's work tonight isn't about politics, it's about people. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Because you haven't mentioned the $2 million raised tonight, or the 300 students who'll graduate debt-free because of this foundation. You didn't ask about the single mothers in the Bronx who've found housing, or the pediatric clinics opening in Appalachia." Calloway's smirk faltered. He opened his mouth, but Barron raised a hand, not a gesture of aggression, but of dismissal. "No. You're here to play judge, jury, and executioner, to reduce a room of hope to a courtroom of your own making. Tell me, Mr. Calloway, when was the last time your byline fed a hungry child, housed a refugee, kept a kid off the streets?" The journalist's face flushed, his fingers whitening around his microphone. Barron's tone never rose, never wavered. "You want to talk about hypocrisy? Let's talk about the man who claims to fight for the vulnerable, but uses their pain as a punchline. A woman near the front, a donor in emerald silk, clapped once, sharp and loud. Others followed, a wave of applause crashing through the ballroom. Calloway stiffened, his eyes darting to his peers, but the usual camaraderie of the press pool had dissolved. Even his colleagues looked away, suddenly engrossed in their champagne flutes. Barron turned to the crowd now, his voice broadening to include them. This night isn't about left or right, it's about lifting people up. Every person here knows that. Every person here chose that. He gestured to the banners behind him, their bold letters spelling hope in crimson and gold. So let me ask you all, do we want to let one man's agenda hijack that? Or do we want to get back to work? The room erupted. Donors stood, applauding. A CEO in a bespoke suit whistled through his teeth. Melania watched her son, her eyes glistening, not with tears, but with a ferocious pride. Barron didn't smile, didn't bask. He simply nodded once to the crowd, then turned back to Calloway. The journalist opened his mouth, a last-ditch retort on his lips, but Barron cut him off. You're welcome to stay, Mr. Calloway. The real work's just beginning. But if you're here to help, not perform, we'll save you a seat. It was a masterstroke. Calloway's exit was a study in humiliation. Shoulders hunched, face mottled red, heels clicking too fast across the floor. The cameras followed, of course, but the crowd's attention had already shifted. As Barron stepped down from the stage, a philanthropist gripped his hand, murmuring, "Your father must be proud." Barron met the man's gaze. "Tonight," he said quietly, "is my mother's night." By the time the desserts were served, the story was trending, not the charity, not the donations, Barron. Clips of his speech ricocheted across social media, spliced with hashtags and heart emojis. "The Guardian of Grace," one headline read. "The Trump who talks back," sneered another. But in the ballroom, the conversation had shifted. A tech mogul pledged an extra $1 million to the foundation. A school principal from Queens secured a meeting with Melania's team and David Calloway. His tweet tonight reminded us that integrity isn't inherited, it's chosen, was ratioed into oblivion by sunrise. As the last guests drifted into the velvet night, Barron stood by the ballroom's grand piano, sipping sparkling water. A reporter approached, younger, less jaded, her voice tentative. "That was incredible," she said. "How'd you know what to say?" Barron studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "I didn't. I just listened. He told us who he was in the first question. The rest was cleanup." She opened her mouth to ask more, but he nodded toward his mother, now surrounded by a group of laughing children, a local choir who'd performed earlier. "The real heroes are over there," he said, and walked away, leaving her staring after him, pen poised over an empty page. The chandeliers dimmed, their light softening to an amber glow. In the quiet aftermath, Melanie slipped her arm through her son's as they exited through a side door, away from the cameras. She didn't offer praise. She didn't need to. Their silence spoke volumes. A shared understanding, a mutual respect forged in the fire of public scrutiny. The night had proven something the world often forgot. Bloodlines might define lineage, but character is carved in moments. And in that ballroom, under the watchful eyes of fortune and fame, Barron Trump had carved his own. The valet brought the car around, its engine purring like a contented cat. As they slid into the back seat, Barron glanced at his mother. "You okay?" She smiled, a real one this time, warm and unguarded. "Better than okay," she said. "You?" He leaned back, staring out at the glittering skyline. "I'm ready for the next one." The Lonnie laughed, a rare, rich sound. "Careful," she said. "The world isn't used to Trumps who think before they speak." Barron smirked, rolling down the window, let the night air rush in, cool and bracing. Maybe it's time they learned. Somewhere across town, David Calloway deleted his tweet.